Aparna, thank you for being with us today on the Conservative Commander Radio Show.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, we're glad to have you on. As you know, we're gonna chat a little bit about about what we expect tonight from the State of the Union address. And at least that's where I'd like to go with this in our time here. But as an economist and a professor of economics, I know you're looking forward to some degree, anyways, with what the Barack Obama is going to say tonight. I've seen some labor economists who have said they hope the president announces some true job-creating policies. In my opinion, I don't expect anything good from the address because I have difficulty finding any good economic policy in the last 5 years. But from your perspective, is it logical, Aparna, Mathur, to see any free enterprise-based or true job-creating policies being announced tonight in the State of the Union address?
As you said, I think most economists and most of us are hoping that there will be some announcement. Over the last 5 years, the biggest crisis has been the labor market. We've recovered from what we would term the recession. And the recovery happened almost 5 years ago, but we're still not out of it. For most people, they're still stuck in the hole. They're still looking for jobs. And the problem has been that the administration has not come out with any job creation policies that would effectively target the problem of the unemployed and especially the long-term unemployed. So unfortunately, I think that the focus will again be on income inequality issues, on economic mobility issues. I'm assuming from the previews from what I've seen so far that there will be a big discussion about minimum wages. And again, minimum wages are exactly the wrong tool to be using at this time to fight joblessness, to fight poverty. There's tons of research to show that this is not effectively targeting people who are in poverty. And secondly, if you're raising the cost to employers of hiring people, what sort of job creation policy is that? So I'm hoping he will steer away from those, but unfortunately I don't think that that's going to happen.
You mentioned the whole focus on income inequality and the minimum wage. Now, let's go down that road just a little bit further. What possibly, other than some diversionary tactic, can there be on emphasizing income inequality in a circumstance where you are not in a position you can't equalize things anyways, let alone it's not the role of the federal government, but certainly when you go to minimum wage, as you were suggesting, and I know from being in the legislature in Pennsylvania, when we dealt with things here, that minimum wage mandating actually goes the opposite direction when it comes to creating jobs. Is that what you have found as well?
Yes, absolutely. So you're right. I mean, I think the income inequality issue is a diversion. I think it takes away from the fundamental problem, which is a problem of joblessness and poverty. And we know that there are these 10 million people who are unemployed, and 4 million of whom have not had jobs for 27 weeks or longer. And, the minimum wage impacts on employment are at best, insignificant in the sense that you might actually not lose jobs, but nobody thinks of it as a job creation policy. And aside from that, I mean, as I said, there are very few people on minimum wages who are actually at or below poverty. So this whole emphasis on raising minimum wages at a time when we have high youth and teenage unemployment rates and we have high unemployment in general is a policy that's destined to fail. I mean, we're not going to see job creation coming out of this policy, and nor are we going to see huge reductions in poverty coming out of a minimum wage increase. So, I just don't see the point of sort of emphasizing that over and over again as opposed to other programs that could actually help.
The effect of Obamacare. Rick Trader and I were talking before you got on about the likelihood of how much time is going to be spent in this State of the Union address relative to Obamacare. But certainly if you take and connect Obamacare to economic growth, it's also affecting job deterioration with so many companies forcing their people back to 29 hours, that kind of thing, to avoid the mandate. Talk to me a little bit about what you think we may or may not hear relative to Obamacare and impact on jobs.
So I think, in the State of the Union, he is probably just going to talk about the success of Obamacare so far, which is that we finally have a website and maybe some 2 million people or 3 million people have enrolled. But you're right that the long-term impacts are still uncertain. So, there might be people, and I'm sure there will be people who benefit from Obamacare. But if you talk about, small businesses who are now being forced to offer health insurance to full-time workers, or to even large businesses who are now have to take into consideration the cost of health insurance. I mean, these are big costs that they are anticipating, and on top of all of the other uncertainty that they face in the economy today, which is a lack of demand, a lack of sort of looking forward and seeing what's happening to sales and so on. This is exactly the wrong policy to be forcing down everybody's throat at this time. So you're absolutely right. I mean, it will have negative effects on employment going forward, and it'll probably take many, many years before maybe firms are able to internalize the cost and we're able to do some assessments. But as of now, there is enough anecdotal evidence to suggest that firms are shifting to part-time workers, or they're shifting to sort of staying at that 50-employee cutoff so that they're not forced into the whole health provision requirement of Obamacare.
Which obviously is not growth, but actually a restriction. But Aparna Mathur, who is a resident scholar with American Enterprise Institute, I want to ask you this next question here. I'm not sure if Barack Obama is going to comment much on the state of the dollar. It's hard not to, because it's so critically part of our economy.
Yeah.
But if he does, my guess it's not going to be real truthful. But with all of the QE under departing Bernanke, and the mass manipulation of the gold and silver markets we've been seeing, and now we're just reading today, clearly, strategies by Russia and China to replace the dollar, the petrodollar, in the Middle East with something other than the dollar. I think the dollar stands on the edge of collapse if they are able to dislodge the dollar as being the reserve currency. Can you speak to me a little bit about that aspect of what you see, and do you think you're going to see anything on that issue mentioned tonight?
I doubt that, that'll be sort of center stage or, even something that he actually brings up. I mean, you're absolutely right that, again, the quantitative easing and the loss in the value of the dollar over time is a big issue. But, again, economists, stand on both sides about whether it's a good policy, whether it's a bad policy. Some people do think that quantitative easing has helped with the labor market issue. So maybe unemployment did go down marginally as a result of quantitative easing. We have seen corporate profits go up, and there's probably a direct link there. As to the fact that I doubt that it will actually result in a loss in the dollar being a reserve currency for the rest of the world, because we are lucky in that we are the United States, and we traditionally have. People still have confidence in the dollar. People still want to invest in America. So I think there will be a demand for the dollar. Those are not really the issues that I am that concerned about. But, we do worry about sort of the long-term effects of quantitative easing on inflation and so on. We're still waiting for them to be played out.
But wouldn't you agree that with the debt as high as it is, and the printing of the dollars having been so enormous as it is, that if there was any turn at all where the interest rates were where those around the world say, you know what, I just don't want any more of this U.S. dollars, and that ticks up at all. Is there a mechanism to pay our debt at the enormous levels of debt that we have?
Oh, that's a huge issue, and we've already been downgraded last year by S&P, and so those are very real issues, and I think investors do worry about what's happening in the U.S. and what's happening to the value of the dollar, and whether they still think of the U.S. as a safe investment. And if we continue to face these troubles, if we continue to sort of face trillion-dollar deficits every year, we continue to build up huge debts, I think at some point, you're right, we could be in a much bigger crisis than we are now, in the sense that even overseas investors lose confidence in the U.S., and that would be a real turning point for the U.S. I am hoping that that's not something that will happen anytime soon, and we will reverse course before that.
And certainly I'm one of them who doesn't hope that happens anytime soon either, but, the policies of the administration have done nothing to shore this up, but just really to almost exacerbate it. So that's my concern, and I agree with you. I don't think we're going to see much, if anything, mentioned on this issue, because it's probably a little bit too complicated for most people to understand. But I don't think we're going to probably go that way tonight either. But I want to ask you a question. Can you stay with us on the other side of the break?
Sure, absolutely.
Aparna? Okay, I want to ask you a question when we come back, and that is this. You can think about it. The president's earlier threatened to use his pen and the phone to effectively make law through executive orders and bypass Congress to get the economy moving. I'd like to know what your opinion, what he will do, what you think he may do in that area after we come back. Aparna, before we left for the break, I wanted to ask you a question about what you thought the president is meaning. Maybe you speculate a little bit on this, but when he said he was willing to use his pen and the phone to effectively bypass Congress to get the economy moving. What do you think we're going to either see? It may be announced tonight, or what may we see in the future? Because frankly, there's a lot of things that potentially could be done, and so
I think from what I think and from what I've read so far, in the State of the Union, the executive order that he wants to claim that he will go forward and do is the minimum wage increase for federal contractors. So that's the one thing that I've seen being bandied about and talked about a lot, which is that he wants to raise the wage rate for federal contractors through an executive order, because he just doesn't believe that he can go through Congress and get it done. But of course, as you said, there are many other issues on which he's claimed that he just wants to bypass Congress and go ahead, say gun control and climate change and so on, and we haven't seen much of that. So it's still up for speculation.
Scares me. I think that ought to really put Congress on their heels. But I've been hearing, many. At least on the Democrat side, are saying, well, you know what? We've got an impasse down here, and something's got to be done, and almost, willing to forfeit their constitutional duty, which is immensely fearful thing, frankly, in my opinion. Absolutely.
I mean, it's also somewhat disappointing that we can no longer get bipartisan support for policies coming out of Congress. It's almost as if, well, now if somebody's in power, it's basically, they can decide what's the best policy for the millions of people out there, and that's whatever they think basically counts for 100%. And that's actually a dangerous road to go down. I mean, the reason we have a democracy, the reason we have two parties, and we need bipartisan supporters so that we can hear the opposing point of view. And if he decides that he no longer needs to hear that, well, that's kind of scary. That's kind of a dictatorship or a monarchy, and that's not the America that we all dream we live in.
Absolutely. There was one other statement that Rick and I were talking about earlier in that same press conference 2 weeks ago at the White House. There was another statement that was made by the president, which was the first time I have heard this, and it gave to me a glimpse into the reasons why. But he said this. He said these things, the reason for the pen and the phone and doing all of this, was to, quote, I want to advance a mission to unify all Americans, end quote. Now, that to me is loaded with a lot of potential speculation, but none of those are idle words in my opinion. A mission says something to me, but to unify all Americans at a time, and I think we're going to hear some of that tonight perhaps, that there's not a unity and there's division and so forth. I think is going to kind of play off of that with Congress and so forth. Yeah. But again, this is speculation, and I don't know if you've heard this statement or thought about it, but I've tried to imagine, say, what is it that could possibly be forthcoming that would unify Americans other than perhaps more disastrous policies, which would unify Americans toward their hatred for the policies. But I don't know what there could be that would be a unity that would pull people together at this point. Any idea?
No, I mean, again, I think it has to be about, I think he thinks that most people agree that income inequality is a big issue, and sort of having policies, maybe raising tax rates on the top even more, or having policies that add to redistribution, or more welfare policies. Maybe those are the issues that he thinks would unify people in the country. He probably thinks that there's a lot of support for that. And I frankly think that there is not, I don't think most people view income inequality per se as a problem. I think most of us agree that, there are people who earn way more than people at the bottom, and most of us believe, and still I think there's a Pew survey out showing that 40% of people still believe that if they work hard they can move up the income ladder. So most of us don't hate or feel antagonistic towards the top 20% as he believes we do. And I think his whole thing of sort of unifying America, maybe sort of lowering income inequality by either having more harsh policies for targeted towards the rich, or having sort of pro-poor policies. But again, if he thinks it's minimum wages, then that's not the right anti-poverty policy to do.
Yep. I think you probably could be right. Rick Trader, you want to jump in on this?
Yeah, I did. Last night I was watching a program about the rise and fall of the Third Reich. And one of the things that Adolf Hitler talked about is shared and equal incomes among the masses.
Right.
And I'm listening to your interview with Sam, and it's just ringing in my ears what I heard last night coming out of the mouth of Adolf Hitler through a translator. How he went on and on how certain segments of the population of Germany had it all and others had nothing. And in my opinion, all income equality does is make everybody poor.
Yeah.
And if everybody's poor, who is to pay for all these social programs that Barack Obama and the left and the Democrats want? Now, Sam, I just had to jump in with that.
Well, Rick, I appreciate you doing that, because I think that, the parallel, see, the thing of it is, to compare one person to another is one thing, but ideologies, Rick Trader, are common, and they occur from civilization to civilization. That's what we're seeing. We're seeing an ideology, a viewpoint of economics and so forth, and some of them are historically disastrous and some are historically good, but these we're on have been historically disastrous. Aparna, we're about close to closing up here today and have to leave, but I'd like to give you an opportunity to say any closing words or to tell people, our listeners, where to go to find out more about your writings or blogging, anything that you would like to reference.
Yeah, absolutely. I've written a lot about income inequality, and I also testified recently at the Joint Economic Committee. So all of my work is on the www.aei.org, and if you that's the AEI website, and if you go to Scholars, you will see me listed there. My name is Aparna Mathur, and I look forward to your comments if you have any.
Very good. Well, Aparna, we really appreciate the fact you were with us today in the Conservative Commander Radio Show. Thank you for your input, for your work and scholarship, and we look forward to having you back with us.
Thank you so much. I would love to be back.